eugenics, what they did was try to improve the opportunities for those races they considered to have civilizational capacity to thrive and flourish in the population. In negative eugenics, those races, according to their crazy theories of inferiority, that did not have the same civilizational capacity, they had to remove the things that would help those races to flourish and try to get those races to decrease in the population. And so in positive eugenics in Costa Rica right up until the 1940s, they had special immigration policies, right, that brought in whites from any part of Europe so that and gave them free land and sometimes all kinds of other incentives so they could come here and populate the country, so they could call this place a European country, so this place could have civilizational capacity, right? In terms of negative eugenics, some of the things they did was experiment with diseases. You know about the Tuskegee experiment in the US, where they injected blacks with syphilis to see what would happen. In South Africa, when apartheid was over, they found a lab. In fact, the National Lab of South Africa had been working on special diseases to wipe out blacks. This is a fact, right? They engaged in massacres, 1911, 1912 in Cuba. They put up posters in Havana, and they say, let's go down south to Oriente and massacre as many blacks as possible, because we need to improve the racial stock of our country. They also engaged in sterilization of our people without their knowledge and against their will. Very important. And I saved that for last. Why? Because I found some of the most disturbing things about sterilization very recently. The United States of America, in their eugenics policy, which started in 1907, 32 states took up special eugenics laws with sterilization as part of them. I discovered that sterilization continued until 1979. In 1979 in North Carolina, the last sterilization that we know of took place in the United States of America. And the point I want to make, let me give you another example. Peru, before I make the point. I discovered that in Peru, they were doing the same thing to indigenous people. Because, let's get this straight, brothers and sisters. We're not talking about just an attack on Africans. We're talking about an attack on 7/8 of the world's population. All non-white peoples. So all indigenous brothers and sisters face the same music. I discovered in Peru that between 1990 and 2000, almost 400 indigenous people, most of them women, were sterilized without their knowledge. The way they did it was something called an operation called a tubal ligation. Most of these sterilizations were done in 1996 and 1997. More than 200 a day on indigenous people. Some of the women were actually pregnant when this operation was done to them. And they lost their babies, and some of them became ill and died. And some of them are still suffering today from those operations in the 1990s under Fujimori, who is thankfully in jail today, but still to face the music for those crimes. And the point that I want to get across, brothers and sisters, is that we cannot depend on the morality of others. When I started off this presentation, I spoke about the propagation and the prophesization, the profession and the professing of universalism, equality, and so on, and the observance and practice of something else. We cannot depend on the morality of others. This is not a matter of mere success or failure. This is a matter of life and death. The only thing standing between you and I and what happened to those indigenous people in Peru is the power of our community globally. that was to happen to our people today, because of the power we've been able to acquire collectively, somebody would have to pay. Those indigenous people can't get compensation, they can't get nothing. They can't even get recognition for those crimes yet. The international community hasn't even recognized that genocide under Fujimori yet. He was tried for stealing money and for killing a few university students and sentenced to something like 15 years in prison. He has not even been tried for the genocide of indigenous people to the tune of 400,000. Why? Because of one thing, power. You understand that? Yeah. And why do I make that point? Because we have to work together, brothers and sisters. We have to become more united. We don't all have to join the same organizations, but we have to join an organization somewhere with people with our like minds and our like interests, and work together with them. And when we see the opportunity, work together with those from other organizations for the betterment of our people. And as I said, it is not a matter of failure or success. It's a matter of life and death. And this is something that Marcus Garvey understood quite thing. And this is why he was able to organize 10,000 people worldwide, 10 million Africans worldwide, before you had telephone, before you had email. Imagine that. I mean, we can't even, some of us can't get an organization of 20 people going. I mean, we have text messages, BBM, and we can't get 5 people at the meeting on Friday, right? But Marcus was able to get 10 million worldwide. Before you had, a telephone. He couldn't call the people in Costa Rica and say, hey, brothers are coming. He had to send a message. The ship had to sail. It's taking them weeks to come here. And that's how it worked out. So he understood that. So this is the Emancipation Project. This is why we come together the way we do around this time of year. This is the importance of using August 1st. Now let's talk a little bit about August 1st, emancipation. This is something we need to understand. This is not an ethnic event, emancipation. This is an event of global significance. Let's try to understand that. This is not an ethnic event. It doesn't just matter to us. It matters to the world. Emancipation is the end, represents the end of the institution of chattel slavery. It is the delegitimization of the rationale for one man to be able to own another, to do with as he will. That is a huge step in history of humanity. And the reason, brothers and sisters, thank you. The reason, brothers and sisters, that the world does not want to come to terms with this particular observance of this particular event is because it has particular significance to us. Now this is how we're going to turn it around, brothers and sisters. We're going to go out there and we're going to talk to them about the significance of the event to the world. That's how we're going to get the Costa Rican government, like the Trinidad government, to put money for emancipation. Because we're talking about a step forward, a large step forward for mankind. But we're going to use this particular observance the way our ancestors wanted it to be used, for our upliftment. The way Marcus Garvey would want it to be used. You understand the trick in this whole thing? This is an event of world significance. One of the greatest steps of mankind in history. The end of the period where one man can own another to do it as he will. Everybody has to celebrate that. Everybody has to commemorate it. Otherwise we could be doomed to relive it. But we, brothers and sisters, must continue to use this particular special event for our own interests. And that's what we've done in Trinidad. We've set up emancipation as a parallel institution to schools, to churches, etc. And wherever we find gaps in the mainstream institutions, we try to fill those gaps with the things we do between May 25th and August 1st. Wherever we find gaps in education and knowledge, wherever we find gaps in our people's ability to understand the economic system, to be able to make moves on their behalf economically. We try to fill those gaps. And we bring scholars from all over the world, the greatest African minds to Trinidad, to see if they could help us to move our people forward. This is the emancipation project that you are involved in here today, brothers and sisters. In closing, as we get near to the end, there is something that we must be mindful of. If this emancipation project is to succeed, if this emancipation project, and let's go over what we've said, we understand that the world says one thing and it does another, and we are the victims of the other thing. We understand that there are two reasons, there are two ways that they justify. One, denial of historical truth, and the other, theories of racial inferiority. We understand that the emancipation project is here to deal with that reality. But we have to understand something else if we're going to be successful. We have to understand that these theories of racial inferiority, this denial of historical truth, does not just affect the way other people look at us, but the way we look at ourselves. And that's very, very important. We are sometimes worse victims of this historical reality than other people who look at us with scorn. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And let me give you an example. I was in Guyana 2 weeks ago for a wedding. And I barely know the groom. I was there as an invitee of the bride. And after 2 days, the family came to me and said, Mr. Cameron, we'd like you to be a groomsman. I was shocked. I didn't know how it happened. Everybody was very serious when they came to me. So I said, brothers and sisters, what's the matter? Well, the groomsman who was supposed to be in your place, we had to kick him out of the wedding. I said, why? He said, because this brother from Guyana, African brother just like me and you, found out that the sister, the bridesmaid that he would be accompanying down the aisle on the day of the wedding, was from the south of Sudan. And if you know anything about people from the south of Sudan, there is nobody in this audience who is as dark as the people from the south of Sudan. They're very, very black. Right? And he said, I can't walk down the aisle with a woman so black. How are people going to look at me? And right away, in fine style, the matriarch of the family kicked him out of the wedding and uninvited his whole family. So the point I'm making is that we still have what Bob Marley called mental slavery. Steve Biko reminded us that the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. When we look around us today, we still see the obsession of our people with straightening their hair. We look at the question of Jamaica. We see bleaching at an obscene level in Jamaica. You now have an entertainer called Vibes Cartel from Jamaica who is advertising bleaching creams that he is selling himself, and he's used himself as an experiment. Right? And as I was telling Auntie Martha, there's a sister who says from Jamaica who was singing about it, and she says, in my life I have never seen a man who did blacker than Baba Green get whiter than Michael and Billie Jean. It's like him always celebrating Halloween.